Coming up on The World Today. Structural concerns halt the search for survivors at collapsed tower block in Florida. Chinese president warns China will not be oppressed in speech marking 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. Plus, World Health Organization warns of a new COVID-19 wave in Europe as a 10-week decline in new cases ends. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. We begin the program in the United States, where structural concerns have halted the search for survivors at a building which collapsed last week in Florida. Officials say work will resume when it is safe. 18 people are confirmed dead, while 140 remain unaccounted for. Among the latest bodies to be identified are 2 children aged 4 and 10. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden is visiting the scene shortly to meet victims' families. The White House says it is hoping for the best as the possibility of finding anyone alive. It is 100 years since the Chinese Communist Party was established, and as the country celebrates, China's President Xi Jinping has some strong words for leaders supposedly interfering in the country's affairs. In his address to party members and indeed the world, President Xi warned foreign powers that they will get their heads bashed if they attempt to bully or influence his country. He also said Beijing would not allow what he calls sanctimonious preaching.
General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, President Xi Jinping, today presented to the world a thriving China that is advancing with unstoppable momentum towards rejuvenation. The CPC is rallying and leading the Chinese people on a new journey towards realizing the second centenary goal of building a modern socialist country, he says, noting that a century ago, at the time of its founding, the CPC had just over 50 members. Today, with more than 95 million members in a country of more than 1.4 billion people, it is the largest ruling party in the world and enjoys tremendous international influence. He also noted that the great founding spirit of the CPC is the party's source of strength. Over the past 100 years, he says, the party has carried forward this great founding spirit. Through its protracted struggles, it has developed a long line of inspiring principles for Chinese communists and tempered a distinct political character. As history has kept moving forward, the spirit of the party has been passed on from generation to generation. President Xi stressed the need to root out any viruses that would erode the party's health. As part of celebrations today, representatives of the Chinese Communist Youth League members and young pioneers saluted the Communist Party. Representatives even read out a poem to express commitment to the party's cause. Today, they said, we stand at the Tiananmen Square close to the heart of the motherland. Before the gathering at Tiananmen Square was an air echelon flying over the square, escorting the flag of the CPC. The flag was carried by a transport helicopter and guarded by 2 armed helicopters on both sides. Later, residents gathered to take photos of the military flyovers and to sing the revolutionary songs of the Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party, which was founded in 1921, came to power 72 years ago after a long civil war. In that time, the country has undergone massive changes, but some of these milestones were conspicuously missing in the propaganda drive.
Some updates on the COVID-19 pandemic now. The World Health Organization is warning of a new COVID-19 wave in Europe as a 10-week decline in new cases ends. It urges local authorities in host cities to better monitor the movement of Euro 2020 football fans. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 pandemic update.
Thank you, Dr. Smallwood. The World Health Organization says crowds at Euro 2020 football stadiums and in pubs and bars in host cities are to blame for the current rise in coronavirus infections in Europe.
A 10-week decline in number of COVID-19 cases in the 53 countries in the WHO European region has come to an end. Last week, the number of cases rose by 10%, driven by increased mixing, travel, gatherings, and easing of social restrictions. This is taking place in the context of a rapidly evolving situation. A new variant of concern, the Delta variant, and in a region where, despite tremendous efforts by member states, millions remain unvaccinated.
The WHO is not alone in their thoughts of the Euro 2020 crowds, as German Minister Horst Seehofer has also voiced his opinion, saying the European soccer governing body, UEFA, is utterly irresponsible for allowing big crowds at the tournament during a spike in the coronavirus crisis from the Delta variant. With COVID-19 restrictions varying from nation to nation, crowd sizes have ranged from completely full, such as 60,000 in Budapest, to 25 to 45% capacity in other venues where there have often been around 10 to 15,000 spectators. Away from Europe and over to Thailand's resort island, Phuket, as it reopens to vaccinated tourists under a pilot program to revive its devastated tourism industry.
Paperwork's a little bit difficult because it's new, doing it through the embassy, but yeah, it worked pretty quick, very fast.
Millions of people visited Phuket every year before the pandemic, and Thailand lost about $50 billion in tourism revenue last year alone. In Bangladesh, police officers check vehicles and army soldiers patrol streets in the capital Dhaka as country entered a strict lockdown, allowing only essential good carriers and ambulances to move on the streets. The country recorded 115 coronavirus deaths on Wednesday, bringing the total to 14,503 overall. And lastly, New South Wales, Australia's most populous state, reported 24 locally acquired COVID-19 cases as the state capital, Sydney, nears a week of a strict lockdown put in place to contain an outbreak of the highly contagious Delta variant of the coronavirus. Around 1 in 2 Australians are currently under stay-at-home orders, while millions of others have been subjected to movement curbs and mandatory mask wearing.
Meanwhile, the EMA, Europe's drug regulator, has announced that COVID-19 vaccines approved in the European Union offer protection against all coronavirus variants, including the highly contagious Delta variant. The European Union currently offers 4 authorized COVID-19 vaccines, including those from Pfizer and BioNTech, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. The head of the European Medicines Agency Vaccine Strategy Team, Marco Cavalieri, has called for active monitoring by vaccine developers to see if vaccines will also provide protection against emerging new virus variants.
We are aware of the concerns caused by the rapid spread of the Delta variant and other variants as well. Right now, it seems that the 4 vaccines that are approved in the European Union are protective against all strains that are circulating in Europe, including the Delta variant. Emerging data from real-world evidence are showing that 2 doses of vaccines are protective against the Delta variant, and also data from the laboratory are showing that the antibodies from the approved vaccines are able to neutralize the Delta variant too. So these are reassuring news. EMA has requested all vaccine developers to investigate if their vaccines are able to provide protection against the emerging variant, and all studies will be submitted to the EMA for review in order to conclude on the level of protection that the current vaccine may offer against the new emerging variants.
Well, let's switch our focus now to Canada, where residents of a village which recorded the country's highest ever temperature, 49.6 degrees Celsius, have been forced to flee by a wildfire. The mayor of Lytton, British Columbia, ordered people to evacuate, saying flames had spread through the village in just 15 minutes. A heat wave has hit Western Canada this week. British Columbia registered 486 deaths over 5 days, compared with an average of 165 in normal times. Abnormally high temperatures have also been recorded in swaths of North America. Well, let's speak to climate change expert, Dr. John Osonwa. He joins us now from Abuja. Dr. Osonwa, thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So it's hard to pin one single extreme weather event on global warming, right? But with the high temperatures being recorded, that's the only explanation that makes complete sense right now, isn't it?
Yes, we are facing an inescapable truth. If you look at the temperature records for the past 15 years, you will see that we have had the highest records within the past 12 years. And each year, the record for the year is eclipsed by the record for the next year. So clearly, there is a trend that is undeniable. And when you look at what is happening around the world, we are putting out 30 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year, despite efforts to cut down on carbon emission. And that is creating the classic greenhouse effect, trapping heat. What we have now is like a heat blanket across North America and parts of Canada, and we are seeing records being broken on a daily basis in some of these towns.
Well, we're just wondering how dire the situation is there, as here in Nigeria, we're used to rising temperatures and people don't seem to die from them. So how unusual is it for the Northern Hemisphere to be going through this at this time? And though we feel we're used to the rising temperatures here, are there damages caused to land, sea, and the skin?
Of course. As you just reported, extreme temperature like this can lead to wildfires. People are dying in droves because of heat stroke. You also have, in Africa here, it's accelerating desertification in the northern part of Africa, which is leading to displacement and the refugee crisis we're seeing. It's leading to drought. Even in California, we have historic drought situation going on now. So Africa is extremely vulnerable. Nigeria is vulnerable. We have desertification. We have drought. It leads to crop failures. In terms of human impact, it accelerates wrinkles on the skin. It creates cataracts, which leads to blindness. Is also a major form of heat stroke in many places. So those who are already living with a weakened immune system, the elderly, pregnant women, young people are mostly vulnerable to this kind of extreme heat. And the unfortunate thing is, if you look at the trend, we have about over 400 parts per million unit of carbon in the atmosphere now, which is a record. When you have such a high number, there is a direct nexus to heat waves. So we are likely to see more heat waves in the upcoming years.
And just one last question here, Doctor. How can people cope with these changes? What can they do to keep as cool as possible?
The most important thing we can do for the environment is to plant trees and to reduce our carbon emission. Very, very important, because what we are witnessing is a direct result of the excessive carbon we have put into the atmosphere. It's creating a greenhouse effect for us. We need to plant trees. We need to stay hydrated. We need to stay indoors when the temperature is very hot. And we need to understand that this is going to be a constant emergency now. And we need to have resilience and adapt to the changing climate.
All right. Well, thanks so much again, Dr. Osonwa, and please do stay safe.
Thank you.
Still to come on the program. Princes William and Harry and superfans of the late Princess Diana joined together to celebrate what would have been her 60th birthday with a statue. Thanks for staying with us. U.S. President Joe Biden had announced U.S. troops would be withdrawing from Afghanistan latest by September 11th. But according to a military commander, this could happen within days. U.S. officials say some U.S. forces are expected to stay, however, to protect the U.S. Embassy and Kabul airport. The military is also wary of Afghanistan sliding into civil war as the latest troops leave. Fighting has surged since the U.S. began withdrawing last month, with the Taliban seizing swaths of territory. Security expert David Otto is in London, from where he joins us now. Mr. Otto, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
So, does it still make strategic sense that the troops are withdrawing earlier than scheduled, despite concerns about the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan?
Yes, of course. It doesn't make strategic sense. As you could see, there was a recent visit just a number of days back by the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani. He went to visit the US alongside his political opponent, Abdullah. And one of the points which they raised very strongly is the fact that the withdrawal, it's going to leave the Taliban with a lot more leverage. I mean, despite the Afghan government claiming that it has taken back some of the territories that the Taliban has recovered. But continuously, the fact that the Afghan president went to the US to try and see how they could delay this withdrawal process is itself an indication that the withdrawal of US troops immediately or before September 11, of course, there are reports that these troops could be withdrawn as early as this July, but also in August. I mean, this is a great concern. But from America's point of view, this is 20 years since America invaded Afghanistan and, drove away the Taliban regime. So it is almost time for them to leave the country, but not in peace as they thought.
Well, I remember when the U.S. president made the announcement about 2 months ago that Afghans were fearful about U.S. and allied troops leaving by September the 11th. So should their fears about the Taliban come true, is there a genuine possibility that the damage to Afghanistan's security infrastructure could destroy all the progress that's been made so far?
Yes, this is one of the realistic fears. The Taliban is well embedded, and this is why in February of 2020, the US decided to strike this peace deal because they understand the capacity that the Taliban has. I mean, this is not a mere terrorist organization. This used to be an entire government before, it was, overthrown under the Bush administration. So I think there is a realistic fear. There is a realistic concern that the Taliban have the capacity to be able to cause damage if the peace deal doesn't go through. But also, I think the Afghan government is concerned that as soon as the US leaves, the Taliban might decide, to throw away the peace deal and then re-emerge, as they used to be before. So I think this is a major concern, not just for Afghanistan, but for neighboring states.
Well, how much of an impact would security or the lack thereof in Afghanistan have on the region?
A much greater impact. Of course, countries like Pakistan, who share a direct border with Afghanistan, they were one of the main negotiators. I mean, they, in fact, played a very key role in making sure that they brought the Taliban on the table to talk with the US and the government of Afghanistan. I mean, one of the leaders of the Taliban was actually released by name Abdul Ghani Baradar. He was released by the Pakistani government to sit on the table in order to break the deal. Now, for India, India is concerned that, in fact, by having a deal, it is going to protect, some kind of security and diplomatic relations that they have with Afghanistan, in order for them, of course, to have a better leverage on Pakistan, because of course India and Pakistan are arch rivals. So I think if the deal is not struck, if the US withdraws, under these circumstances, then it is not good news for Pakistan. But Pakistan will be very happy, much more than India, because if Afghanistan is unstable, it gives them the enforcer position, because what Pakistan has promised the United States is that we can enforce any peace deal. But of course, this is not good news for India.
Well, thanks again, Mr. Oto. We will be keeping an eye on the situation in there. Please do stay safe.
Thank you.
U.S. comedian Bill Cosby's release from prison after his sexual assault conviction was overturned has led to an outpouring of anger and shock. His 2018 conviction for drugging and molesting ex-basketball player Andrea Constant was overturned on Wednesday. Judges said there had been a process violation by the prosecution, but admitted their ruling was unusual. Many have expressed concern that the decision could deter women from coming forward in the future. Ms. Constant and her attorneys said the decision is, quote, not only disappointing, but of concern in that it may discourage those who seek justice for sexual assault in the criminal justice system from reporting or participating in the prosecution of the assailant. British princes William and Harry have put their differences aside to unveil a statue to their late mother, Princess Diana, on what would have been her 60th birthday. The brothers, whose falling out has been the subject of intense media focus, displayed a united front as they revealed the statue they commissioned in honor of Diana in the sunken garden of Kensington Palace in central London, her former home. The bronze statue depicts Diana, who was killed in a Paris car crash in 1997, surrounded by 3 children, which Kensington Palace said represented the universality and generational impact of her work. 39-year-old William and 36-year-old Harry were joined by a small group of guests at the private event, including their mother's brother, Charles Spencer, and her sister, Sarah McWaddell, and Jane Fellows, as well as a sculptor, Ian Rank Broadley, and garden designer, Pip Morrison. All right, well, that is all we have for the program today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.